So hello, welcome back to a new video. Today I'm going to talk about something that might have slipped lots of people's radar, or they're making fun of it because it's announced on the same day as the new 135mm G Master lens 1.8. I actually think that the other thing that they announced is a much more interesting product. And it's there's a silly number again. It's called the something remote. I will get a number, but it's basically their Bluetooth remote that Sony announced today for some of the cameras. And I think there are a few hints in there that actually I think will turn out to be very important. And in fact, if you've been following my channel and our Facebook group about the firmware release list, I think we will get back to that list and we will now add one. We'll probably write a little bit of a follow-up on this tonight and make another video asking for very specific requests, because I think Sony just opened the door quite interestingly to new features. Although many people will just see it as a Bluetooth remote, which is too expensive, I actually see it as quite differently. So let's get to it. So I don't want to make new videos anymore about some of the small rig stuff, but I figured that I put a camera here. I just want to make a quick remark, if you've been following that the nice thing about the new Alp brackets, I hope you can see it, let me take the top view, is that you can now, because there's an extra hole for the a7iii plug, you can also put now your cold shoe over here, which I think is kind of a nice sort of location. For the rest, it's just here as a prop, not that important. So I put the old remote over here, which normally I use to control the top camera, so I now have to do it by hand if I want to zoom in and out. But that's basically what I wanted to talk about. Sony announced a new Bluetooth remote, and that might not sound that interesting, but the interesting part is that means that they are actually actively changing the protocols. Why do I say this? Well, tiny bit of history. Up to about, I think, middle of last year, they actually had quite an open system, an open development system for the protocols going into the cameras. So over the USB and even the Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi, and also if you hook it up to the computer, so tethering, they were quite open about, and there were toolkits that you could download. They then closed it up when they dropped the whole apps idea, so they went from Android to a new system. And the protocols never returned the same way as they were before. I know this because I've been beta testing for a few apps, and the one that jumps to mind is one, if you look on my channel, called Field Monitor for iOS, which is actually a very interesting app. But one of the limitations that was in there, I think there's now clear hints that Sony is going to remove them or have removed them. And I think there's a hint in the release date, which is in April, because I think the needed features for this is in the new versions of the software. Let's go to that page and look at what the hell I'm talking about. Now I forgot on which page I put it on. I'm guessing this one. Yeah! So we are going to one of the shop pages, and I just wanted to point out a few things, hopefully that will be doable for me if the letters are not too small. So let me try to explain first. Let me give you the model number. So it's a Sony RMT-P1 Bluetooth wireless remote commander. Now, there's two things that are interesting to me about it. The most important thing is, or three basically, is the side. And let me try to zoom in. Hopefully that will work. Yeah. Oh, not that side. It was a very boring side. But look at the other side. So let me zoom in on that one. Now, what we see here is basically something that is so far not possible in the protocol anymore. So you can see that it has a mode for zooming, but it also has a mode for focus. And so far the protocol does not allow us to set the focus or to change the focus over the protocol. So what this means that over at least the Bluetooth protocol, and I think they are unifying them all together into one, means that we can start controlling the focus again. I'm hoping it means not just that we can give a focus signal, so that, which is by the way already working in video mode, that you can sort of press the button and it will try to refocus. If it somehow missed the focus or whatever, you can sort of give it a little bit of a kick, almost like pressing the AF on button, and in video it will try to regain the focus. But you also see that on the side you can now put it on focus. And if you go back to the other picture, so this one, that will be controlled, as far as I can understand when reading it, by these two buttons, right? The plus and the minus button. So that means that in the protocol we can now do focusing. Of course, they probably build this in, and that kind of makes sense if you look at the other features, for vloggers, right? Because that means that if you're using focus peaking and you want to do manual focusing, that you can now quite easily, probably somewhere with your hand without people seeing it, if needed, refocus your camera from far away to close by, etc., etc. So that's very cool all in itself. But what is more cool is that because this is over Bluetooth, it also opens up for other applications, including, I think, iPhone applications or other external applications, to do more with it. Because some of these lenses, right, so if we go back to this one, for example, they are quite linear now. So I can imagine that we can also start thinking about apps that are using this feature. And again, I am guessing here, and I'm hoping that Sony just didn't do two signals like focus and move forward and move backwards, but they also maybe even allow us to have, let's say, a linear range, right? So that you can set and remember the points, because otherwise the applications need to do it. But I do think this opens the door to lots of interesting applications, internally, but also externally, things like allowing an application to set multiple focus points and then switch between them, right? So pre-program focus points, because it's now quite linear, and that you can press a button and it will go to the focus point that you set. In fact, I think they might even be able to implement that in their own remote control, so the one that's now on the screen, because they also have allowed us to program two buttons, right? So let me first talk about the second interesting feature, is that there's a little light on there, which will work, as far as I understand, to do either in photo mode. It will confirm your AF, so that you have focus, which makes sense in many ways, right? So you can at least now give that signal. And also there, of course, because you can do the zoom in and the zoom out, and you can switch on the side, and you can focus, and you can do focus peaking. Having a way that you can send an AF signal to focus and to see if you have a lock on the focus is kind of interesting, even if you don't have an A6400 or you don't have an external monitor. So the second thing which I think is very useful for is in video mode, you can actually use this as a tally light, right? So it tells you when the camera is actually recording. So I think this is, let's say, an interesting workaround from Sony to work on the problem. The third feature, which was not working with the one which I have on the table, so this one, because I tried several ways. In fact, I also tried the IR remote, which I need to tell something about. So unlike the IR remote and this remote, there was no way to program the buttons. And now they openly sort of explain that two buttons, looking at the layout, it has to be the C1 button, because clearly it says C1, and the AF on button, which we know that we can reprogram, means that we can now reprogram two buttons in this remote scenario. And that's also very interesting, especially if you combine it maybe with the tricks we were talking about before, that you could set manually 2 points in the camera where you want to focus. So let's say you want to focus on 2 planes in when you're vlogging, then you can imagine that you could see software changes, that the C1 button goes to a certain focus point and the AF1 button goes to a certain focus point. So I think that's also very interesting. Maybe Well, in a way, it's almost as interesting because it also means that they now give us two programmable buttons. But is that because there's only an option to program two buttons in the protocol, or are all the buttons programmable? Just there's not enough buttons on this remote. I know this might sound weird, but you can imagine that once they build this into the protocol, it might actually mean that other software, including again your iPhone or your Android device, over the Bluetooth protocol, maybe can control all your programmable buttons. And that again opens a lot of interesting doors. So yeah, I think that was the three features I wanted to talk about. And I think in many ways this remote is a much more interesting product that Sony announced than the GM lens. I'm pretty sure many people will disagree with me and will think that this thing is way too expensive. But I see it as them sort of reopening the door to be able to control our cameras remotely. Also, they talk about the shutter delay, which they say is 0.5 seconds, so very low. That means that most likely what they did is they optimized it for speed, obviously. And it will probably work continuously in the background, like the GPS protocol, etc., etc. Why is this important? Because if you're using the wired remote, it doesn't have all the features, by the way, but you're also using your door, which has all kinds of negative consequences. But if you use the other option, and the other only option that you have is basically using your IR receiver, that means that your camera won't go into sleep anymore, right? Lots of people have run into this problem, that they found out that the camera didn't want to go to sleep anymore, and we have to tell them, please turn off your IR remote control, because that will definitely not allow your camera to go into sleep mode. And again, here becomes the question, what did they do? Because it's Bluetooth 4.0, so it doesn't use that much power. Are they thinking about having this protocol always on, so that actually, which this one can do, by the way, so this one already allows you, somewhere here, to power on and off the camera. Actually, that's a good thing to check, because that I didn't check. If on the side of this one, we have a similar signal. So let me, sorry to, so zoom, still movie mode. On this side, it has the lock mode. I don't see an on-off anymore. So maybe that's automatic, or you can program one of the buttons for that. But for me, an interesting question will again be, does that mean that the Bluetooth protocol, and I think as a consequence also the other protocols, are they now becoming more powerful? I don't think that's a bad bet, because they have to do it to make this remote Bluetooth remote work. I also think it makes sense from a bigger picture point of view, because I think Sony is going to rewrite their Play Memories app to give us finally features like remote focusing, like remote setting the focus point by touching, and the tracking. I think there's stuff going on there. The reason why I'm saying that, because we already noticed, again, that they closed up the protocols, because my guess is they wanted to rewrite the whole thing. And we already saw when we were doing the Field Monitor iOS app beta testing, that there were changes to the protocol which were weird. They removed a few things, and they moved things around, and that was already, to me at least as a software developer, a hint that they are redoing things. So I will definitely tonight start writing a firmware request asking for a few other small changes. For example, what I would love, but I will get back to that in the feature request, is simple things like not sending the audio over the Bluetooth line, because that's too heavy and not needed. But what would be nice if they would send the audio signals, or the battery level, or things like your horizon information. So I think what is quite interesting now is what Sony is doing, and what are they allowing external apps to also see and change. another good one. Can we requery the Bluetooth protocol to give us the current focus points, right? So I think lots of interesting stuff coming. Again, for video, imagine that you can use remote. You can change. Oops. You can press a button to go into a crop mode or out of crop mode when you're doing video. That's kind of a cool feature, right? You can do from your remote, which they kind of already admitted because they say that these buttons will be programmable and they will be matching the two buttons which are on the cameras. So the last thing, they're announcing all these changes for all the cameras that are getting a software update, which again is a hint that is part of the new software system they are building. So yeah, I think this is probably the coolest news of the day. So yeah, thank you for watching. Subscribe if you want to see more of these videos, and follow me. I am different than other people in that I just sort of, I wouldn't say notice other things, but as a nerd and not a professional camera person, I'm kind of interested in fundamentally different things, trying to improve things for people who are more artistic than me. Let's say it like that. And I love doing that. So yeah, I will definitely continue and take this guest that I see and put it in the firmware request list that we are making. If you're not familiar with that, watch my next video, because we are making a list for Sony of small things we want to see in the next version of the firmware, which sounds like, why would you make a list? They will never listen anyway. But we are in a lucky situation that we know that this list will be shared with the software design team, because we know somebody who's going there in April, and which will be yeah, either using or at least giving them the Google Doc that we are making on our Facebook group. And I will also keep an eye on the YouTube comments and try to incorporate them, and also put a link there to the Google Doc. So thank you for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.